The busiest spell of the 2023 season so far. 6 races in Italy in a 7-week spell that's also included the UK round. And we'll be back racing in less than a fortnight's time. But in the meanwhile, there's still business to be done at historic Imola, celebrating 80 years of motorcycling history with the return of the Motul FIM Superbike World Championship. The Promethean Italian round comes from the Autodromo Internazionale Enzo e Dino Ferrari, first introduced to the World SBK calendar in 2001. The circuit runs around the Acqua Minerale Park, bound on its northern side by the Santerno River and to the south by private residences. 22 turns, no rest for the riders. Even the start-finish straight that only measures 358 metres curves through turn 1. Top speed still reached 280 kph before the circuit's heaviest braking zone for turn 2, Tamburello, the first of a series of chicanes added to modernise the venue before that visit in 2001. Our last trip here in 2019 produced an entertaining scrap between Chaz Davies and Jonathan Rea at Tosa. Easy to run in deep through on an acute line and be passed straight back there. The best overtaking opportunity then is certainly on the run to Ravazza. Get a perfect exit from the Variante Alta, as Alvaro Bautista did to pass Toprak Razgatlioglu yesterday, then go side by side through turns 16 and 17 to claim the high ground. No, we didn't oversleep, but yes, we're 5 minutes behind the planned schedule here in Imola. Race direction, in conjunction with the medical director, have agreed to push back the start of the sighting lap to reduce the riders' exposure to the blazing sun on the grid. And on our first July visit to Imola, and with extreme demands of 2 races in one day at these high temperatures, the race to distance has also been reduced from 19 laps to 15. Steve English alongside me. We're told the riders were in agreement with the decision. Toprak Razgatlioglu probably threw a party, and he might well do so at the end of this afternoon.
Yeah, speaking to a few riders yesterday, they did say how difficult the conditions were for them for a 19-lap race, and that was before you had the Superpole race this morning. So good decision to reduce the race by 15 laps, also to delay people going out onto the grid by another 5 minutes. That was actually one of the big concerns for the riders. Speaking to quite a few of them, they said that basically all they were planning to do was wait as late as possible before leaving the pit box to get to the grid, and then try and minimise the time out there anyway. Danilo Petrucci, maybe the 5 minutes will make a bit of a difference for him in his comfort break. That's the only problem for the riders.
Yes, indeed. High temperatures, 36.4 degrees at the moment out there. Track temperature 58.4, the hottest temperatures we've seen this weekend so far.
Yeah, it really is hot. 59 degrees track temperatures, and that is difficult for the riders out there. The teams have all been joking on the grid about just how stifling the conditions are. One crew said they wanted to take out a frying pan and fry an egg on the grid, and I wasn't sure if it was the best content, but you know, whatever it takes for social.
Hey, if you've got one of those metal post boxes, time to put some bread in there or whatever. That's the thing that's been going viral lately, isn't it? So, in terms of race 2 this afternoon, our grid set by the Tissot Superpole race earlier on this morning, when the track was much cooler. Air temperature was only 4 degrees cooler, I'm afraid. Toprak Razgatlioglu, a quarter of a second, victorious ahead of Alvaro Bautista. Great scrap between the two of them on the final 2 laps. Andrea Locatelli holding on ahead of Jonathan Rea to take 3rd position. Best of the rest, Michael Ruben Rinaldi, 2 5th places for him so far this weekend, but he's much more in play now for race 2 this afternoon. As are Alex Lowes and Danilo Petrucci, the 2 big winners of that Tissot Superpole race. The 2 men from outside of the top 9 who've made their way in at their expense. Dropping back to the 4th row of the grid are Brad Rea and Loris Baz. But Rea drops from 6th to 10th. Baz drops from 9th to 11th. So both are still very much in contention from the start.
Yeah, I think that for the likes of Bassani to drop off the front row, 6th place this morning, he'll be expecting a bit more in this afternoon's race. Yesterday was a P7 in the long race, and now he's going to have to try and recover in this race as well. It's been a weekend where he was much more on the pace on Friday, and it's been a little bit of a reverse of fortunes compared to usual. His form has kind of gone down the grid as the weekend's gone on. Yes,
generally he's not a Friday performer, and he's not usually successful in Superpole, but in race 2 he's certainly going to have to dig deep. Here then is your most recent race winner. It's Toprak Razgatlioglu, 3rd victory of the season earlier on this morning, the Tissot Superpole race. and yet Razgatlioglu has only won over that 10-lap distance. He's desperate to get the monkey off his back and win a feature-length race. That's what's on offer this afternoon, particularly over the slightly shortened distance of 15 laps.
Yeah, and for Toprak, it's always just about the wins as well. Like we heard from him yesterday whenever he had that 100th podium, and he was instantly saying, I'd prefer if it was for a win. And I think Toprak's one of those riders that you'd imagine he'd almost trade all the other podiums for one extra race with victory. And we saw how hard he had to fight in the Superpole race to come through. But this was the move on Bautista for the race win. Over the top of the hill into Piratella, the track drops away from you. It's almost like the world falls away from you through there. But Toprak had the confidence to make the move on Bautista, took him by surprise, and it really was a good move.
Of course, it's what Razgatlioglu wants to be doing to win races, but even more so when it looks as though the World Championship is unattainable this season.
Well, Toprak is as realistic as everyone else, and he knows 95 points to Bautista as we move into the second half of the season is a case of Bautista having to have some sort of really bad luck or injuries. So for Toprak, it is a case of trying to focus on winning races and having fun. He knows that he's got another 5 rounds with Yamaha and he wants to sign off with as much success as possible. He is their top rider in the history of World SBK.
Held on for 12 laps yesterday, held on for 10 laps earlier on today. Can he do it over 15?
Well, he held on for a lap today, really, whenever he came through in Alvaro. 15 laps is going to be tough for him, but for Toprak, it's going to be a case of just trying to make sure you can stay at the front for as long as possible. Bautista, he's got a different rev limits with the Ducati. It does seem to have had a bit of an impact. They're down 500 revs from the start of the season, but it is still the bike to beat, and it's Toprak that's making the difference to be able to compete with Bautista.
Well, I'll be more accurate then. He held him off for 12 laps. He beat him over 10 laps. Let's see if he can do it over 15 laps. Alvaro Bautista is the man he's got to beat. And Bautista himself put in a fine performance in the Superpole race earlier on today, coming from third to first in a matter of a few turns, only then to lose out to Razgatlioglu's late charge.
Yeah, I loved this from Alvaro. It was just opportunistic. He saw the chance to come through on Toprak. He did it, and then he knew he was going to be able to attack Locatelli as well into Tamburello. And when he opened that lead, you thought it was going to be really difficult for Toprak, but he just hunted him down. And as you can see, into the last corner, Bautista was still pushing as hard as possible to win that race. And that's what I love about watching Bautista this year. He's not settling for anything. He wants to just keep winning.
Yes, he was, if anything, a little bit more cautious last season compared to this year. When he's had these fights at the front, he's almost been trying to prove a point that he's there on merit. He's the one making the difference. He's the only Ducati in the top of the World Championship standings. You know, there's 2 Yamahas and there's a Kawasaki between Bautista and the next Ducati, and it's almost as though he feels he's got to prove himself every time he's out on track.
Yeah, I think that there's no doubt everyone knows how good of a job Bautista's doing, and it's been said all the way through the season that he is the rider making the difference for the Ducati. But it was also the case in the past that was Jonathan Ray's task at Kawasaki, where he outperformed his teammates and he was the rider doing all the winning, and the other Kawasaki riders would scrap it out for a podium and maybe even a little bit less. And it's a bit of a similar story as what's happened for Bautista as well. And at the end of the day, Bautista's success is met with the same criticism that Ray's success was met with, because that's what happens whenever you've got one rider doing so much winning and championship and then trying to back it up the second year.
Michael Ruben Rinaldi, he's one of the big winners of that Superpole race earlier on today, because he moves up 3 places from 8th to 5th. He's all smiles now, but he's looked in some discomfort throughout this weekend, carrying an injury from the previous round at Donington Park, where he was only able to score a few points, and as a result sits down in 6th position in the championship. Under a great deal of pressure, Michael Ruben Rinaldi, so good to see him a little bit happier after those 2 5th place results.
Yeah, he's got some fractures inside his heel, and it's a lot of internal bruising as well that's causing the issue, so that's why we've seen him on crutches a lot over the course this weekend.
Yes, I was given the medical diagnosis and went away and did some research, and afterwards I rather wished I hadn't. It's pretty gruesome what Michael Ruben Rinaldi's riding through this weekend. This is Andrea Locatelli, his fellow countryman, up in 3rd position earlier on in the Tissot Superpole race, and what a fine ride he had to put in to hold back Jonathan Ray. Ray having started from P7 and got up to 3rd place in yesterday's race 1. I really thought that Jonathan Ray was going to be able to challenge for a race victory in the shorter Superpole race, as he did at Donington Park last time out. But actually, he was held back throughout by Andrea Locatelli. So, good ride from Locatelli.
Locker rode really well. We saw at the start of the race how much he wanted to hold on to that race lead as well. He wasn't giving an inch to his teammate Razgatlioglu. He was trying to fight for everything, and Locker knew it was a chance to win a race, and he wanted to give it everything he had.
5 minutes then until pit lane will close. The sighting lap begins, and a little bit more of a rush for everyone to get into position, but I think most riders will take their time here in the relative cool. It's not particularly cool in those pit boxes, though, you'd have to say.
Yeah, you can see as well there was a bit of a breeze out there. There's leaves across the track. It's a little bit breezier compared to what's been over the weekend, but you've got 37 degrees air temperature right now, so it's actually a hotter ambient temperature than what we've had at any stage this weekend. So there's nothing easy out there for these teams and riders, but especially for everyone once you get onto the grid, because the bike is naturally very hot by the time it gets onto the grid. It's been warmed up in pit lane, you've done a siding lap. The teams do lots of things to try and keep the bikes as cool as possible on the grid. You'll see them with fans, you'll see them put reflective material on the fuel tank and lots of different things that you're able to just sit close to the bike as much as anything else. But we did see Toprak immediately get off his bike in the Superpole race on the grid and then go over to the pit wall to sit down instead. So teams and riders just trying to do what they can.
Well, the reality is, riders speaking to them yesterday were saying that actually when you're out there and you're racing, it's all right. It's when you're sat stock still and the sun's beating down on you in your racewear, that's when you start to feel those temperatures. We saw in Supersport 300 earlier on today in warm-up, the riders were trying to hide underneath the shade in the pit lane before making their way out on track.
I said it on the Supersport grid when we saw Luca Mayas about the experience that some of the guys that have done World Endurance have, because for some big races in there like the Suzuka 8 Hours, it's high temperatures like what we have now, 35, 36, 37 degrees. It's high humidity, it's really difficult, but they're on the grid for a half an hour in their leathers. They have to deal with those conditions, and when you see the riders having to sit in their leathers, they're sweating, there's no air going through it. The leathers are made for being worn at 200 miles an hour, not sitting on the grid in 37, 38 degree temperatures. So there's no breeze down there, there's nothing to try and cool you down, so you need to try and make sure you've got your cool vest, or you've got a wet towel, you've got ice. You'll see Scott Redding's always one rider we see with ice packs basically packed down his leathers to be able to try and get his core temperature down as much as possible before jumping onto the bike. When you're racing, you're distracted. Your mind is on the important jobs at hand, and then once you stop, that's when you realise how tough it's been.
A long lap here in Imola, second longest circuit of the season, 22 corners and almost 5 kilometres. So the sighting lap itself takes a fair chunk of time. Riders making their way only now towards the grids.
Yeah, we've got 2 minutes left before pit lane closes. Michael Ruben Rinaldi has just left the pits. There's still a few riders in the pits at this stage as well, so we'll see when the last of them leaves. But everyone's just trying to leave it as late as possible, just so that you can get to the grid and try and keep yourself cool.
Bautista wasn't too worried about being soft, though, was he? He was one of the first ones straight out there. Bautista on a mission this afternoon to keep his run of consecutive victories in feature-length races.
And for Alvaro, he's on the front row this time. Obviously, in the Superpole session, he was caught out by those yellow flags. He ended up with a lap deleted and took him off the front row. It didn't affect him too badly. He was able to win yesterday from the second row, but it's going to be him against Toprak from the outset. But Bautista, he'll be your favourite for that whole shot down to turn 1, because even though Toprak was on pole for both races so far this weekend, it was Locatelli from P2 in the grid that led on the opening corners.
Yes, we wait to see how the start pans out here. It's only a short run and it's all curved all the way down towards Tamburello, and if you're on the wrong part of the circuit at the wrong time, you can easily get picked off through there.
Yeah, exactly, and this is one of the key things around this track, is putting your bike into the right place at the right time to be able to attack or defend.
Making our way then up through the grids. As we've said, from 12th position down, it's unchanged. The only changes to your starting order, Bradley Ray and also Loris Baz, losing out to Alex Lowe's and Danilo Petrucci. Other big losers from the Tissot Superpole session, Scott Redding drops from P5 in Superpole, but does hold on inside the top 9, so he's going from the 3rd row of the grids, and Axel Bassani losing 3 positions, going down from 3rd to 6th position. So Bassani will be lining up on the 2nd row. Up at the front, though, your podium trio from the Tissot Superpole race. Toprak Razgatlioglu, 2nd in race 1 yesterday afternoon. A 1st place finish in the Superpole race, the weekend in which he has scored his 100th World SBK podium. But it's only the win tally he's interested in. 35 victories for him now. He's 6th in the all-time winning rankings.
And Toprak knows he's going to be up against it with Alvaro, but the 15-lap race distance might well give him a half a chance in this one. We saw obviously yesterday for the first dozen laps he was right there with Bautista.
Yes, it took Bautista at 12 laps to really assert his dominance on race 1 yesterday afternoon, and he couldn't hold on over the 10-lap distance in the Tissot Superpole race earlier on today. Only his 3rd defeat, though, of this 2023 campaign. 95 points his championship lead. I'm sure he'd like to get that up to at least a cool 100 by the end of this afternoon.
Yeah, and certainly that'll be the goal, and for everyone it'll be trying to make sure that you're able to get the most out of that package to be able to get yourself to the front. 15 laps means it's much more about your outright pace in these early stages. It's almost like a Superpole race and then a little bit compared to the normal feature length races.
Alvaro Bautista with podiums in more than half of his Superbike World Championship race starts already on 17 victories, I should say, out of 20 in 2023. It looks as though it's just about time now to hear the Italian national anthem. The return of the Promethean Italian round for the first time since 2019. And at the climax of the weekend, race 2, we hear the Italian national anthem. Well appreciated by the crowd, who are hoping for a home winner in the shape of Ducati at very least. The factory in Bologna, very much just down the road. So albeit that they haven't got a title contender at the moment from Italy, they certainly have in the Manufacturers' Championship. Here is the foremost Italian rider of this weekend so far. It's Andrea Locatelli. He qualified 2nd in the Superpole session for a Pata Yamaha 1-2. He's been relegated to 3rd, but that was after a fine performance holding back Jonathan Rea for a podium in the Superpole race earlier on this morning. Yeah,
3rd in the World Championship for Locke. It's been a really strong campaign, very consistent at the start of the year, and they're bouncing back to the kind of form that he would have expected here at Imola after a tough couple of rounds. For Lockett, it's about trying to hold on to another top 5 finish. If he can come away with a podium in a feature-length race, it's a really good performance.
4th in the championship, 10 points now behind Andrea Locatelli after his defeat in the Superpole race. At Locatelli's hands earlier on this morning is Jonathan Rea. He only qualified 7th originally. He's that much closer to the front now for race 2, having finished 4th in the Superpole race. 22 race winless streak for Rea. Realistically, though, his target is a place on the podium. Michael Ruben Rinaldi alongside him here, P5, 2 5th place finishes for him, both in the race 1 over a full race distance, and in the Superpole race he charged through from 8th on the grids.
Yeah, Rinaldi trying to keep cool there on the grid and getting a little bit of extra assistance there with a bit more water put down onto that towel, and that's one of the ways that the riders try and keep themselves cool. It's just trying to have as many things out there to try and get that body temperature down. A lot of them using ice. Rinaldi, you tend to see him an awful lot with that wet towel on his head and just getting himself as cool as possible down there for the long race.
Something tells me that that's not the signature he put on his BMW contract for next season. Toprak Razgatlioglu is your Superpole award winner, and he will be on pole for this afternoon's race 2. Just completing the 2nd row of the grid here with Axel Bassani. Bassani down 3 places compared to his Superpole performance. He was 7th in race 1 and 6th in the Tissot Superpole race. The 3rd row of the grid, Alex Lowe's, Danilo Petrucci and Scott Redding. But before we see them, we'll hear from Dave Goddard on the grids.
Yes, I'm down here with Julio Nava, crew chief for Alvaro Bautista. Julio, hot conditions today, but Alvaro coping superbly with him. Do you think he can get that victory to break the record for wins in a season here?
Try. Like you say, conditions are difficult, so we need to see how it goes. Also, they shorten the race, so this will be a factor. We need to see how the things go, but surely we'll try to make it happen.
Okay, best of luck for the race.
Thank you.
Alvaro Bautista then will be lining up from P2 on the grid, and he has been very much the man to beat in 2023. He's won every feature-length race. He has the opportunity to move on to 50 wins in the Superbike World Championship this afternoon, as well as claim that record that Dave mentioned there, season record. At the moment, it's shared at 17. Twice Jonathan Rea has managed 17 wins in a season. Doug Pollen, prior to Rea, held that record, so Bautista could move clear with an 18th win, and with still 5 rounds to go after this one to increase that record. This is the third row then, with Alex Lowe starting now from P7. He was unfortunate to lose his fastest lap in Superpole due to exceeding track limits, but he fought his way through to 7th place earlier on. 9th place for him in race 1. The weekend's trending in the right direction.
Yeah, and it was that Superpole losing the fast lap that really cost him, and that's the biggest issue a lot of riders have in Superbikes right now, is that it's so difficult to make that progress. You've got to take advantage of a good lap in Superpole.
Danilo Petrucci alongside him in P8. Petrucci, the other rider to have made it up from outside of the front 3 rows of the grid, and he will line up P8. 8th position earlier on today, 6th place in race 1 yesterday afternoon. Barney was celebrating that as if it were a podium. Completing that 3rd row, Scott Redding. He's down 4 places from 5th in Superpole to 9th in the Superpole race. Back-to-back top 10 finishes though for him. Behind, Bradley Ray, Loris Baz, Dominic Egerter on row 4. Vieje, Haslam and Gerloff round out your top 15. "20 races done in 2023. Alvaro Bautista has won 17. Toprak Razgatlioglu just 3. And all of them in the Tissot Superpole race. So, a shortened distance for this weekend's climax could well play into the hands of Razgatlioglu. He held back Bautista for the 10-lap sprint at Donington Park, for 14 laps in race 2 of the UK round, for 12 laps in race 1 yesterday, and beat him over 10 laps this morning. Can he stay in front for 15? And then Bautista's run of feature-length race victories here. Steve English alongside Alex Raby to find out. 15 laps, the reduced race distance because of the heat here in Imola. It really is quite severe.
Yeah, the heat is excessive here. It's 37 degrees air temperature. It's 60 degrees track temperature. It's as hot as we get really in World SBK, so everyone's under pressure here at Imola. 15 laps is 4 laps less than yesterday's feature-length race, and we'll wait and see whether or not Toprak Razgatlioglu can hold on for an extra few laps at the front of the field compared to what he was able to do in yesterday's opening race when Bautista came through on lap 12.
Gabriele Rio just exiting pit lane. He has been given another penalty to start from the pits for this race, so that negates any hopes of him coming through and challenging for points-paying positions. Did a good job to come through up to 17th, if I remember correctly, in race 1 yesterday afternoon, and the same position in the Superpole race. But that's the reason that you just saw him coming out of the pits, whereas the others were all on the grid.
Yeah, you can see for these riders now as they make their way around the track, this is Peratella. This has actually been one of the key overtaking opportunities in the Supersport 300 and Supersport classes. This is where Toprak took the race victory this morning in the Superpole race. It's not a conventional overtaking opportunity in a Superbike race, but Toprak was able to make it stick this morning. There's a few places that you can make moves. The key one is down into the bottom of the hill at Ravazza, but that's all about your exit from the next corner up here at the top of the hill, the chicane that leads onto that straight. If you can get a good exit from there, you give yourself half a chance of being able to get the bike down the inside into the Ravazzas.
Quick word on some of the riders further back down the order.